So recently I started Bleach and I just made it to the end of the Soul Society arc and it was amazing. I'm gonna cover everything from the Ikaku fight up until the very last episode of the arc. I don't care how long this video takes me to make, I need to talk about all of it. This arc was way too good. So in part 1 I left off where Ichigo and his crew got split up. Turns out they got split up into 4 parts. You got Ichigo and Ganju, Orihime and Uryu, and you got Chad and Yoruichi by themselves. Turns out the most interesting group of these 4 would be Ichigo and Ganju. Big shocker, right? The one with the MC. Ganju shows off some sort of sand power that I can't imagine Ganju being too strong later on in the story, if relevant at all. That sand power looked really bad, like really bad and weak. But Ichigo and Ganju, right off the bat, found by 2 Soul Reapers from the Squad 11 division, and the show immediately starts gassing up Squad 11. Squad 11, we're the real killers of the Soul Society. We're the real big dogs. So right out the gate, we already have Ganju and Ichigo versus the 2 Soul Reapers from Squad 11. Ganju and the Soul Reaper that he's up against, that ends up being the most boring part of this entire arc. It's just Ganju running away for like 3 episodes, so I don't think it's that important, nor do I need to talk about it. But Ichigo versus Ikaku, that's really where we start to build on the improvement that Ichigo is about to see in this entire arc. So Ikaku reveals himself to be the 3rd strongest member in Squad 11, and that ends up being important because throughout the entire fight, Ichigo and Ikaku are pretty much on the same skill level. So I'm like, okay, if Ichigo is on the same skill level as this guy, how is he ever gonna reach a captain like Gin? But throughout this arc, you're gonna see exactly how Ichigo powers up. There's about 3 different points in this arc where Ichigo gets like a major power boost, and all of it makes sense. But this fight's main purpose is just to show where Ichigo is at the moment. There's also a really important piece of dialogue that's gonna come in later in Ichigo's next fight. What I'm talking about is when Ichigo cuts up Ikaku and he thinks that he won the fight, but Ikaku's like, what are you doing? The fight isn't over. You still haven't killed me. The fight isn't over until I'm dead. And Ichigo's telling Ikaku like, come on bro, look at yourself. The fight is clearly over. I won. I don't want to have to kill you, etc. At the moment, I didn't think anything of this piece of dialogue, but we'll get back to that in Ichigo's next fight, and it's really good and it turns out to be really important. But meanwhile, all of this is happening. You got the side characters like Uryu and Orihime and Chad. They're all being chased away by Soul Reapers that are kind of like nobodies and side characters. But Uryu and Orihime do end up getting caught by a Soul Reaper that actually is strong, and he uses like these wind shurikens, and this is one of the coolest fights in the arc. I'm about to lose my mind, but I gotta save it because there's a fight that Uryu is in later on in this arc. If you've watched Bleach, then you know what I'm talking about, but oh my god, that fight is probably in my top 3 in this arc. We cut back to Ichigo and Ganju, and they're being surrounded by a bunch of nobodies, and then they capture and they hold Hanataru hostage. They're like, y'all better back up. We're about to kill this guy. Like, we do not care, bro. But Hanataru reveals that he wants to save Ruki as well, and since they all got a common goal, he decides to show them the underground sewer system. And when Ichigo, Ganju, and Hanataru make it out on the other end, they are greeted by Renji, who was sitting there waiting for him. And at this point, Renji pretty much resigned from being a lieutenant because this was on his own will. This was against orders. He wasn't supposed to do this. He just wanted to kill Ichigo, and he's telling Ichigo, it's your fault Ruki is about to die. This is your fault. I'm like, damn, it's not like Ichigo is the one that put out the order. You're the one that came into the world of the living and captured Rukia. You're the one that did this, buddy. Regardless though, Renji wants to fight Ichigo because in his crazy mind, he thinks it's Ichigo's fault that Ruki's about to get executed. This is the same Ichigo who just a couple episodes ago was struggling with Ikaku, and now he's going up against the lieutenant, the same lieutenant that watched him at the end of the first arc. So I'm thinking, all right, Ichigo's gonna run, somebody's gonna save him, something's gonna happen. There's no way that he's gonna take Renji one-on-one right now. When I tell you that Ichigo beat Renji one-on-one, oh my god, bro, it was crazy. I wasn't expecting it. I thought somebody was gonna save him. I thought Chad or somebody's gonna save him, bro, somebody. But no, I was wrong. I was gladly wrong. I was happy to be wrong. Ichigo did that fight all by himself. The beginning, he was getting whooped a little bit. In the middle of the fight, we do get an Ichigo flashback where he's thinking back to his training with Urahara, and Urahara tells him that every first release Zanpakuto has like a set amount of times that you can do it before it has to come back. I imagine that piece of advice is gonna be helpful in the future, but it was not helpful right now. That piece of advice almost got Ichigo killed. Renji actually countered that and hit Ichigo, and this blow is gonna be like very critical, but Ichigo's getting whooped left and right on the verge of losing. I'm like, this is not my goat. But he ends up getting a second Urahara flashback in this fight, but this one actually ends up being useful. It's about Urahara talking about the intent to kill. To summarize the fight, Ichigo is like, okay, you know what, I was just fighting you, but now I want to kill you. And then you know what Ichigo does? He damn near kills him. And if you remember, I said this ties back to the Ikaku fight and Ichigo not wanting to kill Ikaku. It was a really creative and unique and subtle. It was a subtle way to explain Ichigo's power spike from the Ikaku fight to the Renji fight. Anyways, after the fight, you got Hanataru and Ganju taking Ichigo back to the sewers. You got Renji's people coming in so they can help him heal up as well. We get a really important scene, like I cannot understate the importance of this scene right now though. Gin shows up and promises Momo that he is going to help Renji get healed. And after that, Toshiro shows up and he tells Momo, beware of Squad 3, beware of Gin. This is the point in the Soul Society arc where the mystery aspect starts to build up, because you got captains who are suspicious of each other. You know, what are captains' real intentions? What do they got in mind? And we'll find out later on in this arc, believe me. But after that moment right there, they gathered all the captains. The head of all 13 captains declared it is officially wartime. Y'all are able to walk around with your Zanpakuto as much as you want. And after that declaration, we get a cut back to Ichigo in the sewer. You remember that cut that Renji gave him above the shoulder? Hanataru tells him the only reason you're alive right now is because this mask stopped that blow, and it was a mask that looked exactly like a hollow. And this is why in my last video I suggested that Urahara probably let Ichigo turn into a hollow on purpose so he can get maybe like some regenerative powers or whatever that power was. Whatever it was though, we're gonna see more of it later on in the arc in my favorite fight of this arc, and I can't wait to get there. But first we got the Momo and Aizens scene where Momo goes to Aizen's room and tells him that she's uncomfortable and she asks if she can stay the night. The whole time Aizen is writing a letter. I just thought, you know, maybe that's captain duties. That's what captains are supposed to do. They like write, you know, hall passes and stuff like that. No, not at all. This note, 5 billion 100 IQ, plays such a pivotal part in the entirety of the Soul Society arc. But Momo ends up falling asleep in Aizen's room. Aizen walks out at night. We see Gin standing there. Next thing you know, in the morning, Aizen is found dead. Now, if you've been keeping up with my videos, thank you. But also, you know that I've been spoiled. I know that Aizen's a bad guy, and I knew in this moment that Aizen wasn't dead. However, I didn't know how he faked his death. I thought that he had like spiritual energy shadow clones. That was my best guess at the moment. But Momo is the one that stumbles upon this dead body, and you know her. She's like in love with Captain Aizen. Oh my god, Aizen this, Aizen that, Aizen. Shut up, right? Gin shows up on the scene. Oh, how tragic. Aizen is dead. Who could have done this? He just started acting like the most suspicious man in the entirety of the Soul Society. And Momo, remembering Toshiro's warning, beware of Squad 3, beware of Gin, she immediately assumes it's Gin that killed Aizen. So Kira ends up being the one to stop Momo from attacking Gin. They place her in jail, and Toshiro leaves Gin with a warning. If you put a hand on Momo, I'm gonna kill you. And right after learning about the death of Aizen, we got captains going up against each other. We cut back to Ichigo. Remember, captains are allowed to walk outside with their Zanpakutos now. Ichigo making his way to save Rukia, finds Kenpachi. We just got so many great episodes back to back to back, and then we get hit with Ichigo facing off against the captain, and in my head I'm like, okay, the same thing I thought about Renji. Ichigo's not on his skill level yet. Somebody's gonna save him, he's gonna run away, something's gonna happen. Keep in mind, this is the first time that we've seen somebody with a visual indicator as to how strong their spiritual pressure is. We didn't even see this with Byakuya, we didn't see this with Gin. Kenpachi is the first captain that we see have such high spiritual presence. They put like a filter on the screen, bro. That's how strong he was. But Ichigo mentally is not ready to take on Kenpachi yet. He's scared, he's fearful. This is a captain that we're talking about, so it's gonna be a couple episodes before they end up fighting. But Kenpachi gives Ichigo one free kill shot. Ichigo takes it and he doesn't even scratch Kenpachi. They did such a good job at making Kenpachi look like a badass, because that's what he is. He's probably my second or third favorite captain. He is so cool. But before we actually get Ichigo versus Kenpachi, we get Chad versus Shunsui. If I mispronounce anything, y'all let me know, but this fight was pretty mid. It wasn't the worst one. It wasn't like a Ganju fight or anything like that, but Chad deserved better. Especially when you factor in what Ichigo and Uryu got in this arc, Chad deserved better. He deserved at least one win. There was one interesting piece of dialogue though, where Shunsui tells Chad that his attacks are draining his life force. I don't know what that's about, but you know, it's gonna be explained in the future, I imagine. And while all of this is going on, Momo's in jail and they give her a letter. It's the note that Aizen was writing in his room the night that she stayed over before he died, before he faked his death. And at this moment, I'm thinking Aizen is plotting something sinister with this note, but they don't reveal it to us until later what is said on that note. But we cut back to Ichigo. Ganju and Hanataru ran off because they know that they're just gonna get in Ichigo and Kenpachi's way, so they're on their way to save Rukia. Ichigo is running for his life because because he's afraid of Kenpachi, as he should be. And Ichigo only gets more scared when he feels that Chad's spiritual energy has disappeared, but when it comes back, Ichigo gets fired up, and this time he's ready to face Kenpachi for real. This is that intent to kill that we were talking about during that Renji fight, and this time Ichigo is able to put a scratch on Kenpachi, and Kenpachi gets hyped, and then I get hyped because Kenpachi's getting hyped because Kenpachi's cool. But this is still not enough to get Ichigo on that captain level. It's not enough to get Ichigo on that Kenpachi level. Kenpachi takes his Zanpakuto, the Zanpakuto that he doesn't even know what its name is. He can't even release it, and he cuts Ichigo's Zanpakuto in half and stabs him in the chest through his Zanpakuto. Ichigo's dead at this point. He's dead. And this is when one of the coldest moments in the arc happens. When Ichigo is lying there dead, Kenpachi's walking away like, I can't believe I wasted my time on this weak kid. And Zangetsu manifests himself in front of Ichigo. Not only was it extremely cold, but it's probably the most important moment of the arc. So Zangetsu brings Ichigo into his inner world, and he has Ichigo fight a version of himself that's like all white. I'm pretty sure this is the one that's creating the hollow mask, and it's like a hollow inside of Ichigo. It's like hollow Ichigo or something like that. And Ichigo beats this version of him. There's a couple of like really good quotes being dropped in this episode, one of my favorite episodes of the entire arc. So Ichigo, even though we thought he was dead, well, I didn't think he's the MC, there's no way I thought he was dead, but he gets back up and Zangetsu asks him, Ichigo, can you trust me? Ichigo says, yeah, I can trust you. And Zangetsu lends Ichigo his power. Kenpachi turns back around because he sees that Ichigo is now stronger than ever, and Ichigo and Kenpachi start fighting for real this time. The anime does such a good job at explaining Ichigo is going toe to toe with Kenpachi because Kenpachi is using his own spiritual energy. All of the spiritual energy that Kenpachi is releasing is his. He doesn't even know the name of his Zanpakuto. But this is Ichigo and Zangetsu combined. They even go as far as to say that Kenpachi got 2v1. This is such a good explanation as to why Ichigo is able to be on a captain's level now. And side note, up until this point, Kenpachi had on an eye patch that was eating away at his own spiritual energy to nerf himself, bro. He is so cold. At this point, I can only imagine how strong Kenpachi's gonna be when he learns the name of his Zanpakuto, but imagine if Kenpachi learns Bankai. Like, that's what I'm on him. I'm sure he will. I'm like, there's no way that they're gonna leave us with Kenpachi not being able to release his Bankai, bro. I'm hyped. But the fight ends. Ichigo and Zangetsu, Kenpachi, they throw out their final attack. They basically tie. Kenpachi views it as an L. Ichigo's bleeding out over here. He fades to black. Boom. Somebody saves him. After the fight, of course. They don't save. Ichigo's not the type to be saved before a fight. Ichigo fights his own battles, bro. That's what I learned about this arc. But Ichigo wakes up in a cabin, and it's Yoruichi, bro. Yoruichi saved them. And we learned two very important facts right here about the arc. Number one, Ichigo had another hollow mask in his possession after his fight with Kenpachi, and more importantly, Yoruichi's a woman. And in the meantime, Ganju and Hanataru have made their way up to Rukia's cell. They're about to free Rukia, and Ganju's like, nah, because he sees Rukia and realizes that's the Soul Reaper that killed his brother. I was very surprised because I'm like, there's no way that it could have been Rukia. This has to be a misunderstanding. But Rukia confirms this herself. She says, yeah, I killed Ganju's brother. So at this point, I'm questioning what happened in Rukia's life at the moment to make her want to kill somebody, because Ichigo doesn't kill nobody. Orihime, Chad, Uryu, they don't kill nobody. So if everybody is so anti-killing, then why would Rukia kill somebody? But this is explained later in the arc, and I love it. It's such a good backstory. It's such a good flashback. But while Ichigo is healing up, Yoruichi is helping Ichigo heal. They feel strong spiritual pressure. It's Byakuya. He's walking to Rukia's cell. Keep in mind, Ganju and Hanataru are there about to free Rukia. So since Ichigo felt Byakuya's spiritual pressure, he takes this flying device that Yoruichi has and he immediately flies to Rukia's cell. And this is right after the Kenpachi fight. And now he's coming face to face with Byakuya. I'm like, this guy wants to die. Like, Ichigo really wants to die. But before Ichigo gets there, Byakuya shows us his first stage Zanpakuto release when he does that scatter. It's one of my favorite Zanpakutos in the entire series, and he does it against Ganju because Ganju says that he's from like the Shiba clan or something like that. I guess they got beef. But Byakuya doesn't kill Ganju because Ukitake shows up. I think that's his name. Ukitake has some sort of illness, and it doesn't play a role in this arc, but I can't imagine that they'd give him an illness if it doesn't become important later on in the show. And this is when both captains feel Ichigo's spiritual pressure coming from a distance. I'm like, that's cold. Ichigo has finally built himself up to, like, people are feeling his spiritual pressure now. And here we get get one of the most important pieces of dialogue in this arc. At least I think so. I could be wrong, but Ukitake is reminded of somebody by Ichigo. Byakuya says there is no blood relation. It's not who you're thinking of. And I'm like, who are they talking about? We as the audience, we don't know who they're talking about, but I think that who they're talking about is shown later on in this arc. Regardless though, we now have Byakuya, Ichigo, Ukitake, all on the bridge. This is the first time since the first arc that Rukia and Ichigo have met each other, but it's really not important right now. They're just joking around. Byakuya tries to end it. He tries to kill Ichigo, hit him with a flash step the same way that he flash stepped him in the first arc. This time Ichigo reacts and counters. I damn near lost it. I was in fact going stupid in the club when Ichigo countered that flash step. It got so bad that Byakuya was like, all right, I've had enough. He's gonna release his first stage Zanpakuto, his Shikai. He's gonna scatter. And it's stopped by Yoruichi, who shows up. And at this point in the arc, Yoruichi just starts flexing on Byakuya. She's like, you cannot keep up with me. You ain't half as fast as me. They start going like flash step for flash step. And apparently Yoruichi has been like the flash step OG of the Soul Society for like thousands of years. And even though you got everybody on the bridge right now, you got Byakuya, Ukitake, you got Yoruichi, Ichigo, Ganju, Hanataru, and Rukia. I thought that this might be, you know, the end of the arc. This might be where the final fight takes place, but it's not. With everybody there, Yoruichi takes Ichigo and they run off, they back off, but not before making a promise to Byakuya. In 3 days, I'm gonna train Ichigo and I'm gonna make him stronger than you. And that's it. Yoruichi takes Ichigo. They run off to a hiding spot that Yoruichi and Urahara used to train with when they were kids. And then this is where I learned what Bankai is. This whole time I've been watching Bleach, I didn't know what Bankai was. I knew it was the power system. I didn't know what it entailed. I thought it had something to do with like the person. I don't know what it was. But when Yoruichi broke down what Bankai is, I thought that was a really cool power system. I really like the concept of the power system being progressions of the weapon that you hold, and you still have stuff like spiritual pressure, spiritual energy, and I doubt that the power system is still fully fleshed out. In fact, I know it's not, because the end of this arc saw Ichigo get a huge power spike in his final fight. But anyways, I now understand the concept of Bankai, and Ichigo has to master this in 3 days to save Rukia, or else he's not going to be able to compete with Byakuya. And this is pretty much what Ichigo ends up doing for the rest of the arc until it's time to fight for real. So we cut back to the other characters and we get one of my favorite fights in this arc. We got Uryu versus the captain of squad 12, I believe. This is why I said that Chad deserved better this arc, because I love Chad's character, but Uryu got this fight and his former fight in this arc, and Chad got nothing, and Uryu dominated both of these fights. Captain of squad 12, big creepy guy, weirdo, experiments on people. Turns out this was the Soul Reaper that killed Uryu's grandfather. I'm thinking logically at this point. Ichigo struggled with Kenpachi a lot. It took Zangetsu manifesting himself for him to defeat Kenpachi. Even then they tied. So how is Uryu going to fight the captain of squad 12 and make it out alive? He ain't even the MC. But Uryu was doing a pretty good job throughout the entire fight. Eventually he did start losing. This is a captain that we're talking about. We can't just be making them look like bots. But it was when Uryu discovered that this was the Soul Reaper that killed his grandfather that he threw everything out the window. He said, look, I don't care if I lose my spiritual energy. I don't care if I die here. I need to kill you. I will avenge my grandfather on my life as a Quincy. I'm like, oh my god, this guy is so cold. And I wasn't even a big Uryu fan at first. I'm like, I've seen this character archetype in animes before. Just the nerdy guy with the glasses, big science geek. You know, nobody's gonna like him. He's unfunny. Not this guy. Well, Uryu took off his glove. He had all the spiritual energy in the world flowing into him. The captain of squad 12, he's like, all right, you know what? Like, I'm about to end this. And he pulls out the Bankai. I want y'all to realize this is the first Bankai that we're seeing since the introduction of the concept. This is the first time that we are seeing a Bankai in action. So I'm like, they're about to make it look devastating. They're about to make this look like the craziest power up in the world. So he activates his Bankai and Uryu shoots a hole through the Bankai, through the captain, down the Soul Society. I'm like, this guy is crazy. He just made the first Bankai revealed in Bleach look like nothing. I had to take a break from watching. I had to take a second and really step back and realize that I just witnessed one of the best episodes of the arc. One of the best fights of the arc. Unfortunately though, even though Uryu just had that amazing moment, he didn't kill the captain. He liquefied himself and got away. And while we got fights going on, like a typical battle shown in anime, then we got Momo, Kira, Renji, they all escaped from their cell. They were all jailed and they all escaped. Renji ends up finding Ichigo and he wants to train with Ichigo because he wants to master his Bankai as well. But the other two are about to play a major role in the mystery aspect of the arc that I was talking about. The who killed Aizen plotline, which I know, I was spoiled about unfortunately, but I could still enjoy it. So since all of them escaped, Toshiro's walking around outside and he finds Gin and Kira walking together and he realizes that Gin was the one that freed Kira. And then Momo shows up on the scene and she sees all three of them, but she starts attacking Toshiro. I'm like, what are you doing? It turns out on the Aizen note, it said that Toshiro was the one that killed Aizen. And Toshiro's thinking, why would Aizen write that? Aizen isn't that dumb. We know Aizen ain't dumb. So now Toshiro's thinking this letter was forged by Gin. We got a lot of internal conflict. People are pointing fingers when in reality, they're pointing fingers at the wrong guy. And the letter also implies that whoever killed Aizen is looking for the Sokyoku. I might have just said that so bad. Whatever, this blade is only released when it's time to execute somebody and it has the power of 1,000,000 Zanpakutos, and that's why they're pushing Rukia's execution date up, because they want it to be released so they can have it for themselves. And remember, I know that Aizen is dead, but I don't know why he's faking his death. I don't know what his motives are, so I thought that that might have been Aizen's true motive. I thought Aizen wants that Sokyoku. And around this time, we also learned that Rukia's execution date was moved up yet again. So now Ichigo has to master Bankai like right now, today. And we also learn about Kaien through a Rukia backstory. I'll try to keep it as short as I can, but this is really important. So Kaien was a Soul Reaper that used to be really cool with Rukia, and he looks, talks, and acts exactly like Ichigo. I know that Byakuya said that there's no blood relation, but this has to be like Ichigo's brother or stepbrother, something. He has to be related to Ichigo because that's the only way that explains how Ichigo is able to develop so fast. So Rukia, Kaien, their captain, they go out on a mission to kill this Hollow. This Hollow killed Kaien's wife, and Kaien got killed by this Hollow because this Hollow took over his body, and then once the Hollow takes over, you can't get him out. And then Rukia ends up having to kill Kaien because Kaien has been taken over by a Hollow. So this is where I started connecting dots. Ganju said that Rukia killed her brother, and we just saw Rukia kill somebody, so I started imagining this is probably Ganju's brother, but this guy also looks like Ichigo, so he probably has something to do with Ichigo as well. They're probably like stepbrothers. I don't know. They're all somewhere. They're all related. I don't know. But it is finally the day of Rukia's execution. Everybody is met up at Rukia's execution site except for a couple of captains. The first of which being Kenpachi, who's actually walking around with Ichigo's friends, Uryu, Chad, Orihime. He's walking around with all of them. They were jailed, but he freed them because he wants to see Ichigo again. Tozen and the captain with a bucket on his head end up seeing this, and they both fight against Kenpachi, and Kenpachi takes them 2-on-1. Then you got Toshiro, who's walking around still trying to figure out what happened and who killed Aizen. And then you got Byakuya, who is just chilling out in the open and finds himself with Renji. And Renji ends up telling Byakuya his goal. He says, I'm gonna save Rukia, I'm gonna surpass you, I'm gonna be stronger. And they both end up dueling it out. And Renji mastered Bankai, and still it is not enough to keep up with Byakuya, who whoops him without even having to use Bankai of his own. Renji is such a cool character, but I hope that they start giving him some W's later on in the series, because so far he's been L after L after L after L. Even when he learns Bankai, he's still taking L's. But when everything is set, they start the execution. Even though some captains are missing, they still lift Rukia up and they release the Sokyoku, which turns out to be like a giant flaming phoenix. Rukia is coming to terms with her death, and when they swing that Sokyoku, who's there to stop it but Ichigo? He basically stopped the equivalent of 1,000,000 Zanpakutos, that's what they said in the anime, with ease. And then the Sokyoku backs up, it goes for a second swing, and captains come out of nowhere and they stop the Sokyoku because they attempt to destroy it. There are some captains that wanted to destroy it. And at this point, Ichigo has pretty much saved Rukia. He destroys the stand where she's being held up on. Renji comes out of nowhere. Ichigo is like, yo, take Rukia, get out of here. Soul Reapers start chasing after Renji and Rukia. They're trying not to let her get away, but Ichigo is making sure that nobody tracks them down. And then Byakuya comes out of nowhere and they start scrapping. And this is what starts my favorite fight of the arc. If it's not Ichigo and Kenpachi, it's gotta be this one. I shift between the two, but when I'm talking about this one, damn, I'm really realizing how peak of a fight this was. So the fight starts by Ichigo asking, why do you want Rukia so dead? And Byakuya doesn't respond. He's like, you would never understand. And then they start fighting and they're about even. Ichigo is caught up to that captain level after that training with Yoruichi. Ichigo is at that level and he's scrapping with Byakuya. And not only is he scrapping, but he is talking crazy. He is like, yo, Byakuya, you better show me that Bankai. Bro, when I was so dead. Both Byakuya and Ichigo were talking the most smack during this fight. But Byakuya is trying to fight and he's not trying to use his Bankai because keep in mind, this is a human, bro. This is somebody that just got their Soul Reaper powers not too long ago. So Byakuya uses his Shikai, he does that scatter, and immediately Ichigo shuts it down with one swing of his blade. It really ended up getting to the point where Byakuya had to use his Bankai. And Ichigo was still flexing. He's trying to fight Byakuya's Bankai without having to use his. I'm like, alright bro, calm down. And Ichigo was holding his own for a while there, but it got to a point where Ichigo's like, yeah, I was foolish. There's no way I could have beat you without my Bankai. So we get to see Ichigo's first Bankai of the series. And this is the coldest moment of the entire arc. Ichigo shows off his Bankai. It's a black blade. Byakuya goes to finish him off, and in a split second, it was like that, bro. I almost missed it. I'm not even joking. Ichigo's got his Zanpakuto pointed at his neck point blank. I could sit here for like 3, 4, 5 days and I could never find the right words to describe how I felt in that moment. That was way too hype, bro. Yo, that was my favorite moment of the arc by far. Ichigo is so swag. But then the fight enters its final segment and Byakuya stabs Ichigo in the foot and paralyzes him with Sankido. Or Hado, what was it? I forgot. And with Ichigo on the back foot about to die, the hollow version of Ichigo inside of himself takes over and starts to dominate the fight. This form of Ichigo is so strong, and I know we're gonna see it again obviously, but like it was making Byakuya, who's a captain, look like light work. So something about this form that Ichigo is in is elite. But Byakuya specifically states that Ichigo doesn't want to win that way because Ichigo tried to like suppress that version of himself. So as I continue to watch Bleach, I do have a prediction that Ichigo's gonna be able to like tap into that inner version of himself, that strong version of himself, but I doubt that he's gonna want to do it unless it's something drastic. But the fight is coming to an end. Ichigo had managed to stop that like inner white version of himself, and they decide to go for one last all-out attack. Byakuya does this final form of his Bankai. Ichigo puts all his spiritual energy into his final attack and they go at it, and Ichigo ends up beating Byakuya. It was such a good fight, man. It was my favorite fight of this arc. It was such a good like conclusion, or so you would think. It was the conclusion of the arc. You would think that's the end of the arc. Nah, if that was the end of the Soul Society arc, it would have been an amazing arc, but the fact that it's not and they decide to do what I'm about to tell y'all is really what makes it peak. So while Ichigo and Byakuya were fighting, Toshiro was looking around trying to figure out who really killed Aizen, and he decides to investigate and he finds out that Central 46 has been killed. Central 46 is the people that are sending out these orders to the execution date, push it up. They're the ones that are ruling the Soul Society. And keep in mind, Central 46 has been on lockdown all the way since Aizen was killed. So they couldn't have been killed after Aizen was dead. They were killed before that. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, Kira shows up and Toshiro and Rangiku see them and they start chasing after Kira, who starts running away. But his purpose is to distract them, because then it is Momo that shows up to Central 46 and she finds Gin, and Gin tells Momo, she shows Momo that Aizen has been alive this whole time. And by now Toshiro has already realized, yo, Kira's here to distract us. I better run back to Central 46, but it's too late because Aizen has already stabbed Momo. And when Toshiro sees this, he loses it, Bankai and all. He tells Aizen he's about to kill him, but Aizen makes him look like light work. And then everything starts getting revealed. Gin is Aizen's lieutenant. Aizen's Zanpakuto is revealed to be perfect hypnosis, and he specifically explains anybody who sees his Zanpakuto is immediately victim of perfect hypnosis unless you can't see it. So Tozen is aligned with him as well. And then all of a sudden they're on Sokyoku Hill and Aizen is demanding Rukia from Renji. And then Renji tries to fight back. He does that roar Zabumaru BS, and then he takes another L because Aizen stops it with his hand. And then Ichigo shows up, Bankai still in hand. Theme starts playing. You think Ichigo's about to do something crazy. He swings at Aizen. Aizen stops his sword with his finger. His sword and his theme stopped immediately. I was spoiled about this. I knew this happened, so. But then Aizen reveals his full plan. I knew that you would come through the West Rukon district. That's where Urahara is. I know you know who Urahara is. He then starts breaking it down. Soul Reapers got 4 main fighting methods, and the only way to surpass these limits is to become a hollow. He says that he experimented with hollows that can take over Soul Reapers' bodies, which ties back to the hollow that killed Kaien. He reveals reveals that Urahara is banned from the Soul Society because he created a Giga that could not be detected, that one being Rukia's. And then he says that he hid the Hogyoku inside of Rukia's Giga. He even revealed that once he found that Rukia was in the real world, he killed everybody in Central 46 and made sure that it was either Gin, Tozen, or Aizen down there at every given point giving out orders. This guy had everything planned out. I know I'm gonna get some comments of people being like, but you knew that Aizen was a bad guy, you were spoiled. Yeah, I knew that Aizen was bad. I didn't know that this was his plan. I had not a single clue what his plan was. And now that I know what his plan was, I can see why people call him one of the greatest antagonists of all time. I can't even compliment this in universe. I can't even say Aizen is a genius. No, I have to say this was masterful writing. Kubo is a genius. These final episodes of the Soul Society arc didn't just tie everything together from the time that Aizen faked his death. Not even since the time that Ichigo arrived in the Soul Society. We're talking about it tied everything together from the first episode. And now that Aizen has Rukia in his possession, he's got the Hogyoku, he's about to kill Rukia. Rukia is saved by Byakuya. And Byakuya had his mind change after his fight with Ichigo when Ichigo told him that he would fight the law. And then bang, Yoruichi comes out of nowhere, Soifon, everybody comes out of nowhere. They surround Aizen, Tozen, Gin, and they get saved by the Menos Grande, and Aizen's plot concludes here. He's getting taken back to Weko Mundo where he will stand atop the heavens, he says. And that has me confused because I'm like, stand atop the heaven? That sounds like a goal for one man. Now I'm worried about Gin and Tozen. How do I know that Aizen isn't going to use them? But oh my god, I had been spoiled that Aizen was a bad guy, unfortunately, but I didn't even have a single inkling as to what his plan was. And the second it was revealed, all of it made sense. All of it was smart, logical, tied everything. It was so good, bro. I can only imagine what it would have felt like to see this unfold if you didn't know that Aizen was a bad guy, or if you saw this while it was airing. Bro, it must have like blown your minds. It was such a good ending. I've made this a 30-minute video. I can't believe that I talked about the Soul Society arc for this long. The arc concludes with us finding out why Byakuya wanted to execute Rukia. Turns out Byakuya is not a bad guy. He just made a bad promise on his mom and dad's grave. Don't do that. And Rukia apologizes to Ganju and Kukaku for killing their brother. Rukia decides to stay in the Soul Society. Ichigo and the crew, they leave, of course, to the world of the living, and they're dropped off at their house by Urahara. It was such a good arc. It was such brilliant writing. Even if it wasn't for Aizen's plan at the end of the arc being revealed, if it just ended at Ichigo versus Byakuya and that's it, it would have been such an amazing arc still. But Aizen's plan being interwoven into the story was so peak, bro. I'm gonna start flashing up like my favorite characters and fights on screen. I don't want to talk about it too much. I've already made this like a 33-minute video, but wow, bro, like no words, just what an arc. What an arc. True, like it was one of my favorite arcs of all time. I haven't watched too many animes, but it was still one of my favorite arcs I've ever seen. If you made it this far into the video, I actually cannot express my gratitude enough. 34 minutes of you hearing me geek out over Soul Society arc. I'm glad y'all enjoyed the video. I'm gonna continue watching Bleach. It's an amazing show. If you've made it this far, please make sure to subscribe. I'm gonna continue making videos like this as I continue progressing through Bleach. And thank y'all again for watching. I hope y'all have a great day. Take care, y'all.